Hello. So I want to talk about this interview with Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, as they're still titled, um, because there's a lot of talking points around it. I have to say, just as a disclaimer, this sort of thing is not the usual thing I'd really be interested in. It kind of it overlaps a bit with a celebrity gossip story in a sense, but realistically, it is more than that. Because it's involving, one of the world's oldest institutions. And it's involving an institution that is at the absolute heart and core of this nation. I mean, it's in our national anthem. So anything involving the royal family will inevitably involve the United Kingdom as a sovereign state because it's such a central part of our culture. So in that sense, I think it's more than just a regular bit of celebrity gossip in that sense. Um, Andrew Morton, who wrote the book on Princess Diana in the mid 90s, he said this will have a ripple effect through generations, as he put it. Um, what I've done is I've taken a few notes and there's a few things I want to sort of discuss. But if this is a little bit fragmented, my apologies. I want to make the video now whilst I've just watched the interview, so that it's kind of fresh. Um, was it dynamic? Yes and no. I say yes because there were some pretty startling claims, or rather, quite things that do make you definitely think. But I also say no because there was a degree of diplomacy, I think, in it. And I can't say there's anything that was so dynamic that would potentially rock the monarchy to its core. So it wasn't that bad. But, it was what it was hyped to be in some ways. Um, There is a point to remember with this, and even ITV acknowledged this as they were covering it. They're pretty sensationalistic. They even acknowledge this, that this is one-sided. Whatever you think of that interview tonight, if you watched it, you cannot lose sight of the fact it is just from their perspective, their side of the story. We haven't heard, and we're not going to hear, at least not in that format, the point of view of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, of Prince Charles, and certainly not of the Queen. So that's something to bear in mind. Harry and Meghan had this hour and a half time frame to basically say their version. There were some things that surprised me about it a little, if I'm being honest. Um, I thought Oprah would be more biased, if I'm being totally honest, because I understand she's close to them. I thought she'd kind of give them what they want. I have to be honest, that didn't happen, so I was wrong about that. To be fair to Oprah Winfrey, she did ask them some tough questions about the public perception of wanting it both ways, for example. The interview was divided into two slots, one just with Meghan Markle, the other with Prince Harry. There's a lot of things that stand out. I'll just go to the elephant in the room first of all, which is the racism aspect, or alleged racism aspect, which is that supposedly Prince Harry had had a conversation, a very uncomfortable conversation, about the race of their baby, Archie. I can't call him Prince Archie because he's not styled that way. Um, Now, both Harry and Meghan, in separate slots when they were together and when she was on her own, refused to give the swords for that. But they have confirmed that it isn't the Queen herself or the Duke of Edinburgh, but someone senior in the royal family apparently brought that up. Whether that's Charles, Camilla, even the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, who knows? Um, is it racist? It's certainly not exactly a conventional question. If someone's mixed race, asking if their baby would be brown, or this is the problem. There's scant information on exactly what transpired. Clearly, it made Harry uncomfortable, and obviously made Meghan uncomfortable when he told her. Um, But I do have a problem with the constant reverts to racism because if and I've got a phone call. I'm not going to cut this off. Hello, Chris. Just give me 10 minutes, please. I'm just uploading a video. Just look out. I'll tell you online when to call back. Okay, so look out for it. Look online. Okay, that's just a friend. We're going to talk about this very subject actually, but didn't want to cut off the video. So yeah, the thing about it, Harry himself said there was colonial undertones to a lot of the tabloid coverage. Now, I've no desire to be a cheerleader for the British tabloids. They can be pretty brutal at times, and they can be cruel. There's no question about it. I have no interest in sort of being a PR guy for the British tabloids. But, the perception of racism would be that she came in and from day one she had kind of had to face this bigotry. I would really question that because when they got married, there was wide public support for them. The British like a royal wedding. Um, Her mother, Dorothy Raglan, was welcomed in by the family. Pretty much the whole national press was in favour of the wedding. There was overwhelmingly an atmosphere of welcome. Now, it would be wrong to say that there's absolutely no racism at all. But what I do question is the focus on racism as if it's a major problem, because I think that is kind of smearing the reputation of this country. And I have to say, the way this has been covered in the States, the likes of Hillary Clinton sticking their nose in and saying, oh, well, this is awful, that this young woman was ignored. What they're doing, what Hillary Clinton and others are doing, is they're taking what the Sussexes are saying as absolute gospel. And they're ignoring the fact that it is only their perspective. I'm not saying they're lying, but it is only their perspective. We haven't heard the other side. So, this is something I really dislike about the American media and American discourse in general is the sheer bias. We get it here as well, we do. But I would argue maybe even more so over there. It's just like, and there's even a possibility of a British American rift over this. I don't really think that will happen. I'm going to show you something. I got this at the time. Careful, don't spill it. Now that might look a bit tacky, but I do collect some royal tack for history purposes. But at the time it was kind of seen as a Anglo-American union. There's just the problem with this is there's a lot of claims and counterclaims. So the allegation was she made the Duchess of Cambridge cry. Meghan says it was the other way around, and she said, well, in that very American woke sort of way, oh well, Kit owned it, right? She was at fault and she owned it, so she was surprised that this was coming out and hurt by that because she was the one who was made to cry. Is it not possible that both women did? Is it not possible that both women were hurt? Um, One big issue they kept bringing up is the security issue over Archie and over them. That is, if they stepped down from the royal family, there would be security implications. And Meghan said she was very surprised that Harry, as the grandson of the Queen, would be stripped of that. Now, I could totally understand that from their perspective. They're public figures, former members of the British royal family. I mean, this is a murky line. Are they even, they're clearly no longer in that inner circle. Um, so the lack of security, it's I can understand from their perspective. I should also say that Meghan and Harry were very quick to point out that the the yeah, I've got a lot of notes here, just different things I want to cover. I lost my trail of thought there. Yeah, before the patronages were, well, when the patronages were cut off, the titles and so on, that was before the interview, so it wasn't kind of punishment for the interview. They wanted to emphasize that. Harry also, there was a point that I found quite interesting. Harry said that both Charles and William are trapped, and he felt sorry for them. He felt compassion for them from that point of view. But there's things that don't add up about this, and Oprah did push it, to be fair. For example, they're signing up to Netflix and Spotify. Harry says that it was never part of the plan. They were doing it to pay for security arrangements. Maybe that's true, but is that the best way to pay for security arrangements? I mean, I suppose you could say anything they done would be in the headlines because they're so famous. But one can't help but feel, well, you want to get away from press attention, and yet you want attention, you know? At the moment, they're probably two of the most famous people in the world. Harry expressed concern, or rather hurt, that his father wasn't more understanding because he'd been through pain. He said some quite blunt things. His family cut him off, um, and they kept framing it as they were put in an impossible position, that they just want to protect their family, and they focus a lot on mental health. Meghan said that she was suicidal at one point. Now, as someone who myself has been through clinical depression, I can only imagine what that would be like when you're already famous, exacerbated, so to speak. So I'm not, I came into this with an open mind, and I still have an open mind. I wouldn't dismiss that. I think there's probably truth in that. Some people are saying she's an actress. I wouldn't believe a word that comes from her mouth. Well, that's a sweeping statement. You can't say just because she's an actress, she's therefore not telling the truth. Um, Looking at this interview tonight, I did have a degree of sympathy, but that is matched by the fact that it is only their side. And Harry was very quick to say our lives are great right now, and he had a little thing with Oprah because she was sort of doubling down on the fact, well, he was a prince, why is he complaining about feeling trapped? And he said, well, he doubled down. Well, what? Because of the smiles, because of that public image, um, the perception. I was happy, which is a fair point because that is the public image. Doesn't necessarily, Harry may well have been very unhappy for a long time. I see a lot of similarities between Prince Harry and Princess Margaret in that sense. So anyway, like I said, I'm sorry this is a little bit disjointed, but this is clearly not going to go away. In terms of the situation with the Duke of Edinburgh, Meghan said that they phoned the Queen just to check in. I assume they didn't know the exact timing of this. If they had any say over the fact this would be timed tonight, or as it was in the States a couple of nights ago, and knowing that the Duke's in hospital. Um, Certainly in Britain, the perception is that there is an Anglo-American divide here because most Americans, apparently from polls, are firmly on the Duchess's side, and on this side of the pond, I think it's a majority from what polls seem to suggest that don't have much sympathy for Harry and Meghan. And Americans might look at that and say, "Oh, the British are heartless. These young people are struggling with fame and pressure, and we don't care." All I would say about that is, if that's your perception, you're only hearing one side. Um, so when Meghan married into this institution, it's hard to believe that she would have been totally ignorant about the pressures of life in the royal family. I mean, she said she didn't know how to curtsy. That might be true. Things like that. And for what it's worth, I will say that if something comes out of this, if there's a perception, more broadly speaking, there is definitely a stuffiness with the royal family. Let's not gloss that over. There is certain things that even today royals are prohibited from doing within firm that probably in the future will need to be reformed because it took that intervention by John Gregg which I mentioned recently, as featured in The Crown, the editor and the Tory peer to really force a monarchy to change. He played a very critical role in history, actually. Um, so there is certain stuffiness in the royal family. Things about, for example, supposedly the Duchess. This didn't come up in the interview, but somewhere else apparently she was told that she couldn't wear the jewelry of her choice. Things like that. There is a certain stuffiness there that I think the royal family will need to modernize if they really want to survive, because the outside world perception, it may well change from it's a great part of British culture and respect for the Queen. The Queen isn't going to be around forever, and frankly, I don't think Prince Charles has the popularity that she does. So I do think that the monarchy will have to change somewhat when she passes. There will be certain aspects of stuffiness in royal protocol, for example, I think will have to go. It may even be that it's forced into a kind of status like the monarchy of Spain, where we still have the institution, but it's greatly toned down. Who knows? I personally find it very hard to believe that there'll be a sudden appetite for a republic in this country, even with Charles as king. Who knows? There might be. I mean, there's already been scandals. There's the whole Prince Andrew thing, which still hasn't been, settled. There is a lot of things that are still rumbling away in the background. Yet the Queen's popularity remains high. When she goes, is there will Charles's popularity help to survive the monarchy? Or lack thereof. Only time will tell. The campaign group Republic, I think that's the formal name, which of course is a Republican movement, say it's time for this rotten institution to go, and they're basing on this interview. Well, they're ignoring the fact that most Britons don't support the Sussexes. There just isn't an appetite in this country for a sudden change to being a republic. I think for that to happen, there would need to be a scandal that so infuriates people, that is so awful, they will force the government to call a referendum on the future of the monarchy. And then, if there's a majority against the monarchy, then we'll have to phase it out. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. Um, I just don't see it happening in this country. So I'll round this up, but it's certainly I would say there's more questions than answers from that interview. Um, there's still issues around. I don't think they were asked. Harry particularly was asked about wanting in both ways. I don't think his response necessarily cleared that up. They said that this was a situation they didn't want, and they still felt a duty to the royal institution. But I don't think they really settled that question. They were framing it as, kind of disrespect to not having security, as he would, being sixth in line to the throne. And there may be something around that, and people may look at that and say, well, the Queen's heartless, or the royal family is heartless, not kind of providing them with security. But I think some of what they said, maybe some of the public statements, or rather some maybe the palace should have made some more public supportive statements. If the Duchess, if her version is true, and she was having serious mental health problems and she wasn't getting the support for that, then it would be pretty cold if she didn't get support from high, people high in that system. That would appear pretty cold, especially when both the Sussexes and the Cambridges have made a big focus on mental health. So I'm certainly not unsympathetic to that. But with these new allegations of bullying coming up against Meghan, um, people are not necessarily going to believe that she's totally the victim here. Who knows? The problem with something like this is, does it solve problems or does it create more problems? Um, I do think that it almost leaves more questions than answers, because the thing is they've given this kind of glimpse into, there may have been some racist sentiment over what color was their baby, but they're not giving any more information. So why say it at all? Why say it at all if they're not prepared to disclose fully? Meghan said that it wouldn't be fair to, as she put it would destroy them. So is she trying to be diplomatic? Or I'm thinking, well, why disclose that at all? Clearly, it made them uncomfortable. So it's kind of like giving this halfway house of information, and that's just going to cause a lot more questions. I guess my biggest concern is that the rest of the world has this perception of the British and the British royal family as being cold and callous. And, the Sussexes have been treated terribly. I think there's certain points in the interview, or you could tell they were trying to be diplomatic, but at the same time, I think there were some missed opportunities. Harry said that he was born in the UK and it was his country. Why couldn't he have followed up, and I care about my country? After all, this is a man who served his country on the battlefield. He risked his life. So it seems that there was a bit of a missed opportunity not to balance things out a little bit more and say we still respect the United Kingdom, um, and the royal institution. And I don't think they really done that. So I don't know. I guess time will tell if this has any significant effect or not. If Andrew Morton's correct, will it ripple through the generations? I don't know. On this side of the pond, that doesn't seem to be the case because most people are quite skeptical of it, skeptical of the reasoning behind it, skeptical of Meghan's influence. For what it's worth, I think she's being a little bit unfairly vilified. A little bit. By the same token, though, I would just say that this is very one-sided. And for prominent Americans to Hillary Clinton to come in and assume that she knows the whole story is crass because she doesn't. I'll leave it there. Let me know your thoughts.